Welcome everyone to the 23rd episode of the Vertical Church podcast. And today we are talking about Luke chapter 14, verses 15 through 24. It's the parable of the great feast. So Phil, could you kind of break that down a little bit and give us a brief overview of what that parable is?
Yeah, absolutely. And so some of you may go, wait, I thought we already had a sermon on this like in the past year. Like, what is he running out of stuff to talk about in the Bible? Absolutely not. So we're doing a series right now on vertical values. We want to be able to have a clearly defined set of values as a church. So whether you've been a Christian for 50 years or whether you've never been to church in your life and you just stumble across our website, we want our values to be clear enough that any person can understand what we're about and where we're going. And then they can also decide if they want to be a part of it or not. Clearly defined values help people either get excited or just know, I'm not about that. Mm-hmm. And so Luke 14 is so core for us as a church because what happens in this parable is, the master sends out a servant to go invite people to his banquet. Says, my banquet's ready, come on in. And he goes out and then he meets person after person after person who has excuses as to why they can't make it to the banquet. And so he comes back and the master's just very upset, because I've made this banquet so that you can participate. And for you to tell me you have other things to go do is ridiculous. And so he sends people out and they get, the poor, the lame, the crippled gets those in. And then there's still room. And so he sends the servant out one more time just to go invite just basically anyone he can find because there's still room. And so what, this parable really applies to our life is because there's still room for you and I, and there's still room for the listener to have an opportunity to come be part of this banquet. And I love this because it talks about when he tells the servant to go out one last time, he's go to the country lanes, go to the roads and compel them to come in. And I love that word because that word is not passive in the least. Yeah. That word is not weak or half-hearted or anything like that. I mean, it's you're giving it everything at this point. Mm-hmm. And I love that challenge to you, me, and the listener to go live our lives in a way that's compelling.
Yeah. And you kind of built this sermon out of that parable with the three values, or at least in this week, we're talking about three of the values of the church. And the first one is walk-ins welcome.
Yeah.
And I love that so much because if we were a church that is closed in on ourselves, which we'll get to in the next point, then how could Jesus have an opportunity to meet with people? And Drew talked about this in the past, we should be a church where people can't pass a background check, that's the people that we want to be, is because that's who Jesus chooses to use. It is us who needed him, and met with him and were changed. And now we can go and be compelling and tell people where the doctor is, to heal the sickness.
Yeah, so Walk-ins Welcome was kind of a cool thing. We actually had different language for it coming into this week. We had been working on these, especially Austin and I, for months now. And we came into this week, gave it one final walkthrough with our staff and key, some of our key leaders, and just try to get feedback. And one of our leaders, and people know her because she's working on the podcast, Caroline. She spoke up and it's I don't know that the way we currently have it worded really communicates well to our target audience here. And so we kind of went back in Austin, kind of came back with some language after getting that feedback, and we changed it to Walk-ins Welcome. And I really love it. I sent him some ideas, but as soon as he sent me Walk-ins Welcome, I was yes, that is it. Mm. And like you said, that we kind of want to be that church. Maybe other people have given up on church, maybe they made a lot of mistakes, but the doors are open for you here at Vertical. Not because we believe we're good enough, but we believe we're inviting you to meet Jesus who can change your life. Mm. And it doesn't matter what you did on this side of eternity, the grace of God is sufficient for you. So the doors are open, come in, we invite you to come meet with Jesus. Mm. And a lot of that's come from this parable, because this parable is pushing you, it's pushing me, it's pushing the listener, we should be inviting people, and it should be compelling.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a little. This was the one that was coming down the wire, trying to get ready for this week.
Yeah. And about that parable too is people have been burned by the church so many times that they think they're not good enough or they're going to be shamed for coming in and this sort of thing. But if you read this parable, Jesus actually didn't come to the scene going to give this parable. Another guy brought it up. And then this was Jesus's response to a guy, which I think is so funny. He just like had it on file, ready to go. But he invites the cripple and the lame and the poor and the people who are sick and broken. And like, I don't know, if we are a church that is not open to those people, which is me and you as well, then like we've missed the point completely.
Oh, absolutely. I'm complete with you. I've heard people jokingly in town kind of describe Vertical as like the island for misfit toys. Just because a lot of us inside of Vertical, we're kind of people that, we're not your first round draft picks at other churches, so to say. Like, we don't have the perfect resume. We didn't live our life in a perfect way. For goodness sakes, I'm the pastor of the church, and, I talked about how I used to really struggle with pornography and all kinds of stuff. I'm not your first round draft pick, but God looked down at Philip and said, I feel like I can clearly show my glory through something like that. Mm-hmm. But that's scripture. Like, if you go read, like, Paul actually teaches that, like, God uses, the foolish things to shame the wise. Like, and when I read that, I'm like, it makes more sense why he's using me, like, I'm not, something so special, this or that. It's all of us at Vertical are just a group of people who go, wow, like, the goodness of God really is for everyone. Like that invitation in John 3:16 and 17, it really is for everyone. That invitation in Luke 14 is for everyone. Like, I just have to submit. Yeah. And so, and a lot of churches understand that as well, But I think what you're saying is sometimes because churches are always made up of broken people and all of us make mistakes. And I'm sure people have left Vertical because of mistakes that I or a staff member have made. That's entirely possible because we're not perfect. Mm-hmm. I hate that because I don't want to see that happen, but we're not perfect people. And so for us, that was super important for people to understand, like, our doors are open here. Like, there's not this criteria you have to meet to be able to come to Vertical Church.
No, man, that's the way it's supposed to be. Like, I've been coming here for 4 years now, like I was there at the first service. And since then to now, man, like, I'm just so confident that like Vertical is just about Jesus and like knowing you and doing the podcast with you and serving and walking alongside the leadership, I'm just so like pumped about where the Lord's taking it, because that very thing is the reason that it's going to be successful. And I think the moment that, which is the next point, like beyond the building, like the moment that we begin focusing on ourselves, like that's when it's going to fall apart. So I'm just proud to be a part of this.
Love to hear that, man.
But in that first point, is talking about going and being compelling, and something that I kind of wanted to address. The master tells the servant, go out into the streets and be compelling and tell the people to come back. And when in the sermon today, you were saying, we need to get outside the building, go out and invite people to Jesus. And at first, when I hear that, I'm like, man, like, I'm not equipped. Like, I've never told anyone the gospel, like these sorts of things. But in reality, like, that, if I have that perspective, then I'm probably thinking that I'm the one doing the saving. Mm. And if we realize that Jesus is actually the one who's doing the saving, then it takes all the pressure off. But if we can just invite people, like, we're not called to like rescue them, like we're called to invite them to the doctor, to the rescuer, to the savior. But I was thinking about this metaphor, like, if I came down with cancer all of a sudden, like right now, I don't know where an oncologist would be in Blairsville or in North Georgia for that matter. But the person who knows where the oncologist would be is someone who has had cancer before. And so when you hear like, go be compelling out in the streets, and the first thing you think is, man, I've already made all these mistakes, and like, I don't know that I'm good enough to like be able to go share the gospel. Well, if you're the one who had cancer, and you found the oncologist, you got to go tell people where he works, and so I just thought that was like a great metaphor to communicate. Like, if we've been broken and we found Jesus, there's no better candidate to go and share the gospel.
Well, absolutely. I love that you had kind of put it that way. I feel like it really helps all of us kind of get our heads around it a little bit of that value in inviting. Because again, we're not inviting people because we have the value. We're inviting people because we know who has the value. Mm-hmm. and we want to introduce people to Jesus. You know, that's always what's so mystifying to me about Christians who become a little dry, get a little prideful, really start thinking they're better than other people. Christians should always be the last people on the planet to think they're better than they are. You know, if you are a Christian, you should always remember, my gosh, I had a moment where I realized I have sinned. I've fallen short of the glory of God, and I need Jesus, and I always will need Jesus. Like, we should be the group of people who are humble because it's clicked for us that we're not as good as we think we are. You know, and we need Jesus. And so for us, we should always be wanting to invite people to him because we, of all people, understand there's something wrong with humanity, and it's called sin. And we know the one guy who can change it for us. And so we really want to invite you to him because we feel like he's going to bring healing. He's going to bring reconciliation. He is going to give you life to the full. And in a life that you never even had any dream or capacity to understand before him. You know, because all we know is our own worldly ideas of greatness. And Jesus transcends all of that. And so I'm so glad you brought that up because your example is so challenging, but also encouraging. Like, we should be the people who can invite because we know Jesus now, not because we're better, or we actually just understand that we're not.
Yeah.
Love that you did that.
So good. Yeah, so the second point is titled Beyond the Building. And so can you just break that down and tell us a little bit about that value of vertical?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where we really want to push ourselves to always be okay with being on the move. I mean, we've been nomads for 4.5 years now at Vertical. You know, we've met in 9 different locations now. We have met in gyms, we've met in civic centers, we've met by the lake, we've met, you know, at schools. I mean, all kinds of different places. And I think sometimes the human tendency is, man, I can't wait till we have a building. And I do agree with that. I can't wait until we have a building. It will make life a lot easier. It'll allow us to do ministry to a whole nother level when we have a central meeting location in different towns and things like it. It will increase our abilities to do things. But what I will end up missing is I always think there's something in the DNA of a nomadic church. And it's because they'll never place the value on where they're meeting because it's not theirs.
Yeah.
Like they're just, that's not where they place their value. It's they place their value in each other, coming together to worship the Lord. And I think that instills something so much in the culture of a church. And I really wanted to see that in our values because I don't want to see it die. You know, whenever we get a building, like inherently people go, that's home, that's where we're going to go. It changes things a little bit. And I just never want to see that happen to us, to lose the thing God was trying to instill in us in our season of being a nomad, of going to all these different places, of we have to be outward focused.
Yeah.
And we can't place our value in a building. Like, God is not going to go, okay, now that you have a building, I'm going to bless you more.
Right.
Because now you're a real church.
Right.
You know? And so for us, I just wanted to challenge us to be what Luke 14 is called, like, go. And go quickly. Like, go be compelling. And know where in there do we need a building to do it.
Yeah.
And then I also want to encourage people, while we don't need a building, I really want one. You know? And I think a lot of people do as well. And so we're not giving up on it, especially, you know, Blairsville is where we feel like we absolutely are long-term called to have a location. And so we're absolutely trying to get back to Blairsville. And I hope, you know, like a year from now, when we go back and listen to this podcast or fun or something, like we're in a building now. But for now, like, we have to appreciate what this season, these 4.5 years of Vertical have taught us.
Yeah.
And it's not about the building.
Yeah.
It's about the people we're supposed to go invite.
Yeah, I think it would be so easy to like submit to that lie that the building is the end goal. Like, once we get a building, then we will have arrived. Like, if that's your idea, then you've missed the point.
Right.
You know, like it's just not about the building. And like he said, go out into the country lanes, you know, and invite people in. And I think with all the stuff we're doing with the new community groups, like you were talking about today, like we've got 12 new community groups and the goal is 20 by the end of the year. Like, that's what we're talking about, you know? Like, if we can sit down with someone and both of us love fly fishing and we go out and we fly fish and we spend 3 hours together, like you were saying, then, like, you know, if we're operating in the posture of Jesus Christ, then, like, it's going to come up at some point, or they're going to feel loved in a way. And that's how, like, we're spreading the word, you know.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up at vertical groups because that is a shift in our church. You know, when I first showed up here 2.5 years ago, I think we had like 4 or 5 groups, maybe somewhere in there, and they were great groups, and some of those are still going and doing fantastic things for the kingdom. You know, we really have a lot of great group leaders. But I just realized as an American church, I'm not talking about vertical, I'm just talking about the American church model has always been so Sunday morning driven that we made it so easy for people to not talk about Jesus. Like if you go to work and like you even want to be invited, you're like, hey, I like God's doing something in my church. Like, would you mind just coming to check it out? See if it clicks for you. See if it's a good fit for you. You just invite them, and they go, I'm busy this weekend. You're like, okay, well, I tried, and maybe you'll circle back in a month and invite them again or something. Like, if that's all we're doing, we've made it so easy for people to avoid a conversation about Jesus. Because like, all right, I'll invite them to church a little bit, maybe here or there, and that's it. Why? Like, why would we ever want to make it for a society easy to avoid it thinking about Jesus? Like, we should make it difficult for you to avoid thinking about Jesus. Now, you may meet plenty of people, like Luke 14 tells us, that have excuses, they don't want to, but all those people were invited. You know, and I think that's where we want to be as a church, where we make it really difficult for North Georgia and beyond to be able to say, yeah, I wasn't invited. Now, we may go out and we may have 25 groups, we may have 50 groups, we may have 100 groups one day, and you may decide, someone did talk to me about Jesus. And the more I thought about it, I just want to live life for myself. Bible actually tells us stuff like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But you won't be able to say we didn't invite you to follow Jesus. You just decided not to. And that's not on us. But it is on us if we've not gone out. And so the goal of the vertical groups, and we talked about this with a lot of potential group leaders actually last week at the orientation, was the breadth of what a vertical group looks like is very vast. Like, we don't have a set formula or a set model or anything like that, but we do have a very clear mission about what is a vertical group. And it's a group that is led by somebody or some people who are intentional to help people draw closer to Jesus and each other. Like, that is the lens for whether or not you're going to be a vertical group. Like, if you want to just go ride your bikes with friends, but you're not ever going to be intentional about helping people get closer to Jesus through it, that's great. You have a group of friends that rides bikes, but it's not a vertical group.
Yeah.
But if you have a group that goes and rides mountain bikes, and like you guys always get together and pray beforehand, and then halfway through your trip, maybe you stop and you look and you go, hey, like, how's something just one way we can pray for each other here? Like, and you just have this conversation, invite Jesus in the moment. Like, that absolutely is a vertical group. Because some of those people who love biking will come out and ride with you, but as soon as you try to invite them to church, they're like, yeah, no, hard pass.
Right.
But it doesn't matter if they came to that bike riding group or church, because that group leader is going to have the same mission as a Sunday morning going, yeah, we need to talk about Jesus and how he applies to your life. And that's the win. People don't have to come to a church on a Sunday morning anymore if we fulfill our mission at Vertical to be invited to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to be beyond a building. It's got to be more than just a Sunday morning thing for us, because we have to look at every day of the week as of equal value and opportunity to invite people to Jesus. And when we do that as a church, I think we'll step into so much of what God is asking us to do as an uppercase C, as a global church. I think he's looking for all of us to go be churches and do the things he's asking each church to do that believes in Jesus and the Bible, to go invite people all days of the week. And by no means says any of these values, and I want to be clear about this, these are not like super unique values in the sense of like only Vertical can accomplish these and only Vertical's been bestowed the blessing to accomplish these. By no means. By no means. Like, we actually think almost all these values are uppercase C values. You know, how they play out may look a little different between churches, but I think all churches are passionate about these things.
Yeah.
And they should be, because they're all biblical. You know, we're basing these off Scripture.
Yeah.
So by no means do these values make us like crazy unique and we're the only ones who can do it and you should get really prideful about Vertical. We've missed the point if that ever happens. But we just want to be really clear that we want to see every day of the week as an equal opportunity to invite people to follow Jesus.
Yeah. That'll change the game. And I think, sadly, it'll surprise people. Like, if you're out there on the mountain biking trail with your friends or this group that you've started, and you're talking about Jesus, but you're not at church, they're going to be like, wait a second. People have been trying to get me to go to church my whole life, you know, but now you're out here and we're like having a good time and we're talking about Jesus here. And I think people will be surprised at that because it's Jesus coming to meet with them and not them having to accomplish something by going to church to meet with him, you know?
I think you're so right. Like if vertical groups accomplishes what we want it to be, many people are going to left feeling very shocked by the idea of, well, you know, I didn't come to this group to really talk about Jesus. Like say it's, you know, one of our fishing groups and they're like, I just came here to fish. Well, that's great, but we're going to talk about Jesus some too. Mm. And they go, well, you know, I that's why I don't go to church. Like I don't want to talk about Jesus. And then someone just goes, you don't have to come to church here. You don't have to come to Vertical. We're not trying to force you to come here.
Wait, what?
And they're going to be like, so even if you know I don't really want to come to church, you're still going to try to talk to me about Jesus. Yeah. I just want to invite you to follow Jesus, and you don't have to go to a church on Sunday morning to be invited to follow Jesus. I think some people are going to be left astonished and hopefully curious, you know, because, I mean, ultimately the whole goal is always to invite them to follow Jesus, and then they, you know, get into the Word, they get asking questions, they get around other people who are going to love and care about them and point them clearly to Jesus. You know, I would love to see the day as a church where we have way more people who are getting saved from vertical groups than a Sunday morning. I mean, how cool of a moment will that be as a church? Yeah. And, you know, it's starting to happen in very small pockets where we're seeing people getting saved outside of Sunday morning. And, like, years from now, like, I want it to be not just, like, the beginning of the popcorn. Like, it's in the microwave for 2 minutes and things are just, like, popping everywhere. And, like, if you can get to a Sunday morning and you haven't been saved yet, that'll be really cool. Like, I'll be surprised. Like, how did you get here without getting through a vertical group and getting saved first? Like, that will be where we really have shifted, and we'll see Sunday morning as a catalyst rather than the pinnacle. And then that will be a big win for us as a church.
Wow. That's strong. Sunday morning as a catalyst and not a pinnacle. Dang. And so moving on, this last point is talking about being outward facing. And this is just like right in with everything else we've been talking about. But like if our church was to focus only on itself and like focus on the building, focus on maintaining what we have now, then like you said, like that's exactly when we're going to die as a church. And actually, C.S. Lewis talks about how hell is actually a place that is locked from the inside.
Wow.
And I think that if we are individual people who are focused in on ourselves and not like outward facing toward the people around us, then like that's exactly what we're going to experience, is being locked in to something that is locked from the inside. But I just think that's such a good point. I think through these groups and through the ministry that we're doing outside of the church, the outward-facing value is being fleshed out for sure.
Well, yeah, and so outward-facing comes from, you know, Matthew 28. Like it's the Great Commission, and shockingly, Luke 14 and Matthew 28 are both Jesus. So, like, if you're really starting to dislike our values, 3 values in, I think you have a clear issue with the teachings of Jesus. Like, because vertical didn't make up any of this. Like, we put our own little verbiage around it, but the heart of all these comes straight from Scripture. Right. And in the Great Commission, it says, you know, go unto the nations, you know, and make disciples, teaching them to obey my commands. And so for us, we go, well, in order for that to happen, we certainly can't be inward focused. Like it actually lines up with Luke 14 to go quickly, go to the country lanes, go be compelling. You know, Matthew 28 is basically the same thing, like go. Yeah. And you know, I really wanted to challenge us as a church, like the moment we die as a church will be when we just start being internally focused. You know, of course we're gonna have things that are trying to take care of our body because we are a body, we look after one another. But if we just value what's on the inside rather than going to be compelling, rather than going to the nations, rather than sharing the gospel, like we've missed it. And we will die as a church. Like at that point, we're no longer a church, we're just a museum. And like over my dead body, will that happen? Right. You know, Lord willing, like as long as he has me here, I'll be submitted to the Lord and be humble, and our leaders will all be, and that's what we'll be focused on. It's like, hey, we have another day, like let's go. Like let's go find a way to engage the people around us who aren't coming to church and who think Jesus doesn't apply to their life, and let's ask them to reconsider. Like, and we'll continue to do things that risk that. Like on paper, I'm telling you, starting the Hiawassee campus on paper was a terrible idea. We were in crisis as a church. We were only 4 years old as a church. I mean, there was so many reasons on paper that it was not a good, wise idea. But we just felt like we know there's people in Hiawassee who are not going to church right now. And we have an opportunity to go meet that need? Well, according to Luke 14 and 28, if we have the resources and the means to make it happen, I don't want to answer to the Lord like, why didn't you try?
Right.
Like, so there's always going to be moments of faith that we step out, even if on paper, like it's not, the wisest choice. Let's just wait this or that. Like, if we have the resources and we have the people, we're going to go look to be inviting. Like, that is outward facing. That's just how we're going to be. And so it looks messy. I think people who look in maybe from the outside wouldn't agree with how we're doing it. And I do get that because I understand everyone's critique about it. For us, the issue comes back to we had the resources, we had the people, we're going to go be inviting. Mm-hmm. Like, we're going to go fulfill and be outward facing. We're going to be Matthew 28. We're going to be Luke 14. Yeah. And that's who we're going to be as a church. And that may not be the right jive for everyone. And I get that. Like, we're not going to take offense to that. But if we're going to call ourselves vertical, if we have the resources and we have the people, we're going to go. Because at the end of the day, like, who ends up at that banquet table in eternity with Jesus really matters to us.
Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, just to kind of like, I guess, land the plane here. The one thing that I wanted to do was just like actually challenge the listeners. Like, if you're listening to the podcast in your car or at work or wherever you're at, odds are you're going to come in contact with someone today. Mm. And like, just as we've just talked about, like, you're a part of our church if you're listening to this podcast, and our goal is to tell people, is to go. And I just want to challenge you to love on someone today and, share Jesus with them, because that's our goal. That's what we want to happen, and we want to see people restored and healed, and it only comes through Jesus. And so, I don't know, I just want to challenge you guys with that today.
Yeah, I love that challenge because that fits in so much. We're going to talk about next week more of our values, and shockingly, we're going to talk about exactly what you just said. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about how we want to raise up leaders. We are not existing at Vertical Church for people to point to Philip Kite. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, just come listen to our pastor. He's the one who can get you to Jesus. Just hogwash. Like, that's a pile of rubbish theologically. I won't stand for it because I know myself. I am absolutely not your solution to your sin. Mm-hmm. It's Jesus. And therefore, you don't need Philip Kite to get people introduced to Jesus. Yeah. I'll do it. I'll do it on Sunday mornings. Like, I'll look to teach the Bible. I'll look to be compelling. But for us to see as many people invited as possible, it's for you, it's for me, it's for Caroline, it's for Austin, it's all of our listeners, for us to go, wait a minute, I can invite people to Jesus. Mm-hmm. I can do that. Boom. Yes, 100%. And so I love that you challenge it. And I hope if you're listening, you wrote down what Desi said. You put it on a sticky note. You do something to remember what Desi just challenged us with. Because it's absolutely all of us stepping up. Like, we win as a team, we lose as a team. That's what I believe at Vertical Church. Mm-hmm. And so it's all of us stepping up. And it's so much more than just what can Philip Kite do or what can Desi do or what can Caroline do. Like, we win as a team, we lose as a team. And so the moment Vertical is really accomplishing the values we just talked about is when hundreds of people are doing them. That's when we're going to see some radical things start happening.
Yeah. Go be the church, you guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. If you found the content helpful, feel free to like us, subscribe it, let your friends know about it. If you got questions, email Desi for sure. We'd love to hear from you. And then also thank you to Caroline, all things tech and media behind the cameras today. Great job. And then also Austin Watson, our man from Chicago, editing. Really appreciate him as well. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.